Hi guys, and welcome to this week's video. So you want to install a Windows 10 VM. Well, maybe you just want to run some everyday tasks like some browsing and some office work, so a simple VM with the remote graphics will be fine. But maybe you want to set up a gaming VM because you're itching to play the latest and greatest PC games. So you're going to need to pass through a gaming graphics card, some sound, and throw in a keyboard and mouse. So, whatever your use case is, you're going to want to do it right and gain the best performance you can. So let's jump in and set up a few Windows 10 VMs. Right, so in the first part of the video, we're going to install a standard Windows 10 VM, no pass-through hardware or anything. What we're going to do is we're going to download a Windows 10 ISO, and I'm going to show you where I bought a legitimate copy of Windows 10 Pro for only $20. And then we're going to look at what resources we're going to assign to the VM, and then we're going to install the OS along with the virtio drivers. Once installed, we're going to look at different ways of connecting to the VM, after which we'll do some post-install tips and tweaks and set up some symlinks to make efficient use out of our disk space. And we'll also install a virtual sound card so we can get sound out of the VM without having a physical sound card present. In the second part of the video, when we have a good stable VM, then we're going to pass through some hardware and turn it into a gaming VM. We'll get the hardware working and then tackle some common problems, like something nicknamed demonic sound, by enabling something called the MSI interrupts. Then we'll run a benchmark, and we should have a good gaming VM with very near bare metal performance. Okay then, let's get started. So obviously to install Windows 10, we need a Windows 10 ISO. And obviously the best place to download this from is Microsoft for the most up-to-date version. Now I've placed a link in the description taking you exactly to the correct place. Now a friend of mine showed me where we can buy a legitimate copy of Windows 10 Pro for only $20. And I've also placed a link directly to that as well for those of you who don't already have a license. Okay, so once we've downloaded the ISO image, we're going to want to move it across onto our server. But before we do that, we just need to check where our share is, and for most of us where we're going to put our images is in the share called ISOs here. So just before you do, just open it up and just check here under SMB security settings, the export is set to yes. Now if this isn't the case, then you're not going to be able to see it, so you're not going to be able to transfer the ISO image on there. So once that's done, just click onto done, and now we can just copy this file. And there's my share there, ISOs, and I'm just going to paste it into the share. Okay, so when it's copied across, there's one other file that we're going to need to have here, and that's the virtio drivers. So let's just minimize this, and now if we go across to the settings tab and click on the VM manager here, and we can download the virtio drivers straight from the web UI. So just click onto the drop down menu and make sure you choose the newest one, and then click on to download. And now you can see that file's downloading. Okay, and now that's downloaded, if we go back to the share, we can see here the virtio drivers are downloaded into our ISO share. Okay, so now let's go to the VMs tab and scroll down and then choose the Windows 10 template. Okay, so now here we have to decide how we're going to allocate our available resources to the VM. Now this will depend on what we're going to use the VM for. Obviously a Windows VM that all it will do is web browsing and emails isn't going to need as much horsepower as a Windows VM that you want to game on or do video editing on. Now it's important not to under provision a VM, but it's also very important not to over provision the VM as well. So we need to plan what the VM will be used for whilst keeping in mind the other tasks the server will be running whilst the VM is active. But before we start, let's just give the VM a name, and I'm going to call mine 001 Windows 10. Now if we go down to the part in the template where it says logical CPUs, now when we first get our server, most of us come here and think, hey, the more the merrier, and just click all of the CPUs. Well, this isn't the best idea. and I'll go into far more detail about this in next week's video about performance tweaking, but today I'm just going to point out two important things. Now firstly, the unRAID server likes to use the first core itself, so it's always better to leave this free. And here where we can see these 8 logical CPUs numbered from 0 up to 7, this doesn't mean that I've got 8 cores. It means that I've got 8 threads. Now most CPUs, if they have hyperthreading, will have 2 threads per core. So we need to use these threads in pairs. So a 4-core CPU will have 8 threads, as you can see here. Now automatically you might think, if we untick the low numbered CPUs here, the 0 and the 1, well, we're only using 6 threads out of the total of 8. So we're going to be using 3 cores for the VM, right? Well, no, actually we're not. Let's just click on Tools and open that in a new tab. Okay, so now let's click onto System Devices, and if I scroll down here, you can see where it says CPU Thread Pairings. Now on each line here, that is each core. So the first line here is core 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you see core 1, it actually uses CPU number 0 and CPU number 4. So when we unticked CPU 0 and CPU 1, we weren't actually giving the VM 3 of its own cores. We were only giving it 2 of its own cores and giving it 2 other threads to share with everything else. And what we should have done if we wanted to give the VM 3 cores of its own is we should have given it these 3 here. So we would have given it 1 and 5, 2 and 6 and 3 and 7. So it's really important to always pin your CPUs in hyper-threaded pairs. So now this way we're giving the VM 3 of its own cores and the VM isn't sharing a split core with another process. So with 4 cores, the CPU pairing is as we've seen. But is there any difference if we had more cores? Well, the answer is yes. Now I have a high core Xeon in this server, which at present I have disabled some cores to simulate a quad core CPU. So now let's simulate an 8 core CPU and see the difference. And now you can see with 8 cores things look very different. If you remember before, the 0 and the 4 were the first core. So let's see if that's the same now. No, the first core now is actually 0 and 8. This is because we got more cores. So you're always going to have to check your CPU thread pairings. Don't just try and guess from here. Okay, so now I've enabled the rest of the cores on the CPU. And if we look at the CPU pairings, we can see that it's different again. The first CPU this time is 0 and 14. Now this is a feature that I'd really like to see in the unRAID VM manager. That's the ability to see the CPU pairings whilst assigning the logical CPUs. I've posted a link in the description to a feature request I opened a while ago on the unRAID forums, so if any of you think this would be useful, then please go there and second my request. Right, so I'm going to use 4 cores with this VM, so that means 8 threads. So I've just got to avoid using CPU 0 and 14, so I'm going to use 115, 216, 317 and 418, as these are paired hyperthread cores. And RAM, the same again, allocate as much as you need. Now I always recommend leaving at least 2 gigs of RAM available for unRAID, more if possible. Now don't go over provisioning RAM, there's no point giving a Windows gaming VM something like 32 gigs of RAM, you're never going to need it. And for BIOS, leave it as OVMF, only change it to CBIOS if for some reason you can't install a Windows VM using OVMF. And then for install ISO, obviously we use our Windows 10 image we downloaded earlier, and the virtio drivers ISO, that's already pre-filled in. The next thing here, the primary VDisk location, we can leave that to automatic, and we need to just set a VDisk size. We don't need very much really, because we can use symlinks to link to our array, so I'm just going to use 70 gigs for mine here. Leave the graphics on VNC and the video driver as QXL, and then let's go down to the bottom and click on Create. Now as the VM starts, make sure you don't forget to press any key to boot from the CD or DVD. And there's a problem that you may or may not run into. If you find here that the Windows spinny thing doesn't start turning around and it doesn't start booting, then you're going to have to force stop the VM. So just close VNC and then shut down the VM. And then we want to click on here and then we want to edit the template. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to just allocate one virtual CPU in order to do the install. Now I've only ever had to do this fix before when installing an update to an existing Windows 10 VM, but then I've never installed the Creators Edition of Windows 10 before either. Now don't worry, you're not going to have to leave the VM on only one core. We only have to do this just to install the operating system. Once everything is installed, we can put all the cores back on and everything will be absolutely fine. And like I say, not everyone has to do this fix. It just seems that some of us have this problem and putting it onto one core just sorts it out. And another problem that you might have is very bad web VNC performance. You can see that the mouse is a little bit lagging here and it can actually get worse the longer you're logged in. Now, this is going to be fixed in an upcoming unRAID release, but until then let's do a little workaround. You can see here it says the VNC port and it's 5900. So what we have to do is just basically connect with another VNC client. And on the Mac I'm actually using Chicken of the VNC here, but any VNC client will be fine. So what you have to do is just put in the host, which is your unRAID server IP, and for me it's 10.10.20.199. So you put your IP address in and then you put in the port, which is 5900, or if it says display then just put a 0 and then click on connect. And now we'll have much better control over the VNC and we can install Windows in the normal way. So just click on to install and then you can put in your product key if you want to, or if you want to do that later just click I don't have a product key and then choose the Windows 10 Pro and then click on to next. And then you're going to have to agree to the license terms and then click custom install, and you'll see here that there's no hard drives actually listed and it says we couldn't find any drivers. To get a storage driver, click load driver. So now we have to load the virtio driver. So just click on here and go to your E drive and then expand that, scroll down to the bottom of the list and then you'll see VIO-STOR and then click on Windows 10 and then AMD 64 and then click OK and then click next. And now with the storage driver installed we can see here our virtual hard disk, so just click on to next. And now Windows will install without you having to do anything else really, so just sit back and get a coffee and wait for it to install. Then we just have to click onto our region and click yes. And then also confirm the keyboard layout. And now it asks you to connect to a network. We don't have a network driver at the moment, so just click skip. And then the VM is going to reboot. And Windows 10 is installed. So we just need to put our username in here. And you can give it a password if you want to, or if you don't, just click next. And then I don't enable Cortana myself, but it's up to you if you want to. Basically I don't enable any of the features from Microsoft. I always like to go through all of these here and turn absolutely everything off. How I figure it is if I feel I'm missing out on something later on, I can always turn it back on. But Windows 10 does an awful lot of data mining. That's how Microsoft make a lot of money selling the data, and I'd rather not have my VM constantly connecting to the internet sending off my personal data. So choose what you want there, then click accept. And now we're onto the desktop. And you can see straight away it says it's searching for a display driver. There's a few more virtio drivers that we're going to have to install. So just navigate to the device manager and here you'll see 3 devices that don't have a driver. But there's another device that most people I think forget, which is actually the display adapter. It automatically puts in the basic Microsoft display adapter, but there is actually a QXL driver on the virtio disk. So we want to browse to our E drive, highlight it, then click OK and then click next. And it'll install the driver. Okay, and next we do exactly the same for the Ethernet driver and the other two drivers. We just browse to our E drive, highlight it and then click next and install the driver. Okay, we've got one last driver to install. Well, we have to install the QEMU guest agent. So just click onto my computer and go to the E drive, and then click on the guest agent folder and run the QEMU GA-X64 file, and then click yes. Okay, so now that's everything installed, so we can close this window. And now that we've changed our display adapter, let's change the resolution, and then we're going to go to a website called www.ninite.com, which allows us to install multiple applications that are useful for our Windows machine. So here we just put a check against every application we want, and then we just download a file which then installs all of these onto our computer. And as you can see, I chose to install the classic skin for Windows because I don't really like the Metro interface. I find this much more pleasant. And now I'm going to download a program called AntiBacon, which removes all of the Microsoft data mining software and blocks it calling home. All of these things you can't easily disable in the regular Windows settings, so this program is a free program and does a great job. It's up to you if you want to install it. This is just something I do. So just download the file and put it onto your computer and run it. Once it's finished, click on Immunize, and then on the optional tab you can click and apply any additional protection that you want, and then click close. Okay, so I don't really like VNC. It doesn't work very well for me. So I'm going to install something called Splashtop Desktop. Now a lot of you might want to use RDP, and that's fine, and it's a great product and it works very well. But I prefer Splashtop Desktop. The personal version of Splashtop Desktop is free, and what I really like about it is it has GPU acceleration for graphics. So if you're going to use a GPU in your VM and you also want to be able to connect remotely, then Splashtop Desktop's the way forward. Anyway, after you've installed it, you're going to have to log into an account. If you don't have one, you need to create one. And also you need to download it and log into the same account on the computer that you're going to be using to access the VM. Okay, so now we need to make some changes in the Windows settings to make it work better as a VM. So let's go to the control panel and go to our power options, and then we want to click on choose what the power button does. And here we want to disable fast startup. Okay, and now we want to click on show additional plans, and we want to change the profile to high performance, and let's click on change plan settings and then change advanced power settings, and we're going to disable the USB suspend, and we're also going to set it so the hard drives never turn off, and click apply and OK. And also I personally like to have it so my display never turns off. And then you can close this window. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to disable the indexing feature on Windows. Because we're going to be storing most of our data on the array, it's not really necessary to have the indexing on. So what we want to do is click onto the start and then type services.msc and press enter. Now if we scroll down, here you can see Windows search. So let's stop the service, and then right click it, go to properties, and we're going to put it onto disable, and click apply and OK. And now let's click onto the start again and type in CMD, and then right click CMD and run as administrator. Okay, and now type the following command: power cfg space -h space off. Okay, and now again to reduce the disk I/O, we're going to disable disk defragmentation. So we want to right click, go to properties, tools, then we're going to click onto optimize, and then we're going to click onto change settings, and we're going to untick run on the schedule, and then click close. Now if we want to do any disk defragmentation, we can run that ourselves whenever we want to. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create some symlinks and we're going to create some map drives in order to get the best out of our array. So what we're going to do is we're going to minimize this and go back to our web UI for unRAID, and let's click onto shares, and we're going to make a new share. Doesn't matter what we call it, I'm just going to call it Windows Disk, and you can choose here whether you want it to use the cache drive or not. I'm not going to bother, and I'm just going to click add share. And under SMB security settings, we just want to make sure it's on export yes, and you can set security if you want to, but if you do set security, then make sure you set up the same username and password on the unRAID server as you did on your Windows VM, otherwise it's not going to be able to access this properly. So click on to done. I'm going to leave mine as just public. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to map a network drive. So go to this PC and then go to computer, click on map network drive, and then hit the browse button and find your server, and then scroll down until you find the share we just created, and click OK and click finish. And now inside the map network drive, let's create a folder called documents. Okay, and now we're going to browse to our C drive and go to users and then find your username. And now if we scroll down to where it says documents, just right click the documents folder and click onto properties, and then where it says location, then we want to click onto move, and then we want to click on network locations and then documents, then click select folder and click apply and click yes to move all the contents, and OK. Okay, and so now our documents folder is mapped across onto the array. So all of our important documents, they won't be inside the V disk, they'll be on the array. So they'll be protected by the array's parity, which is always a good thing. And for those of us whose most important files are game files, we can do a similar thing with Steam. So if we just install Steam. Okay, so once Steam has installed, click on the button saying Steam, and then go to settings, and then click on downloads, and then click on Steam library folders, and click on add library folder. Click on the drop down box here, and then click the map network drive letter, which for me is the Z, and click on new folder and click OK. Click select, then click on the directory, right click it and click make default. And so now all of your Steam games will install into here, and click on close. Okay, and now we're going to download a piece of software. The link for here is in the description. It's a piece of software called Directory Linker. Just click on to download and download that onto your desktop. Then run the file, and we're going to have to download .NET Framework. Okay, so now .NET Framework's installed. Let's rerun the file. And what this program allows us to do is to easily create symlinks. So you can click onto the folder here and browse. So say we go to the C drive, and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm just going to call it array. Okay, and I'm going to link that across over onto the array. So click onto network, and then click onto the server, and then find the share, and then click OK and go. And now if we go into our C drive, we'll see this folder here called array, and that links through to the map drive. It's exactly the same as the Z drive here. And the useful thing about using symlinks is if you want to install a program on the network drive and it checks to see what type of drive it is, you can try using a symlink and seeing if it will install that way. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Okay, and another good use for symlinks is if you imagine we go to our programs folder, and inside there we've got some awesome program, and inside the folder here we've got a folder that keeps all of our settings, and we'd like to actually have that not on the V disk but on the array. So if anything ever goes wrong with our V disk, at least we've got all of the settings off the array. Kind of a bit similar to with a Docker container having an app data file elsewhere. So all we're going to have to do is make a folder for it in the map network drive and just call it all the settings, and start our dir linker again. So we just want to browse to the folder, all the settings, and click OK. And we want to link it to the same one in the share. And again, we're going to leave it on copy contents to target, then delete it, so that will move everything across from here into here, and then it will delete the original, replacing it with a symlink. So let's click on to go, and now we can click finish. So let's just have a look at that. So now you can see all the settings now is over across on the array. So that's some ideas there how you can do certain little tips and tricks to be able to save space on the V disk and protect some of your data, keeping it parity protected on the array. Okay, cool, so now we've nearly finished. Let's restart the VM and install the rest of our cores. And also you'll notice here that we don't actually have any working sound. Now obviously we don't have a sound card pass through, but we can actually install a virtual sound card and get sound working within Splashtop desktop. So whilst we enable the cores, we'll put in a virtual sound card as well. So let's shut down the VM and put these bits in. So let's open the template for the Windows 10 VM, and you'll see here there's only one thread or one logical CPU enabled. I'm actually quite surprised at how well the VM did work with just one thread. So let's re-enable the 4 cores that we originally wanted to pass through to this VM. So that's a total of 8 threads. Then scroll down and click on update. Now to add the virtual sound card, we can't do it through the template, so we actually have to edit the XML. But it's really easy, so just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see where the graphics video driver here is installed. So just underneath that, just paste the following. And we're using the sound model as ICH9. That's the best one to use for compatibility, I think, for Windows 10. You don't have to actually install any drivers. So once you've pasted that in, just click onto update and then start up the VM again. And you can see now here that we've got our sound being recognised. But let's just try playing a YouTube video quickly so you can see what it's like.
The gods created us. I will fight.
So I think the VM is working really well. The video's been a bit longer than I had planned. Sorry it was so long, but I really wanted to cover as much as I could for setting up a Windows VM without using pass-through. Now hopefully I haven't forgotten anything. If I have, then please share and put your own tips in the comments below. In the next part of the video, we'll be passing through all the hardware to convert this into a proper gaming VM with a GTX 1080, and hopefully in the process showing you the common problems and how to solve them. So until then, I'm going to sign off. Well, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Any donations are always welcome, which you can do from the links at the top of the page. Anyway guys, whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in that next video.